They sat me in the kitchen. Not a quirky side room, a working hotel kitchen, steam hissing, pans clanging, the smell of garlic and heat. In a corner by the industrial ice machine, a one-top waited like a punishment. "Your seating is through here, ma'am." The service door swung shut behind me, sealing the laughter out there and the message in here. I'm Terry, 34, the daughter who left with $800 and built a tech company now worth 9 figures. To my family, though, I've always been the forgettable one, the helper, the dutiful, the invisible. Today was my brother Kyle's wedding. 15 years of distance, one fragile hope that maybe the past could loosen its grip. And then this. Back in the ballroom, Crystal caught chandelier light like frozen fireworks. At the head table, my parents, faces set, Vanessa, perfect hair, practiced smile, and her father, Harold James, the kind of man who speaks like every room is a board meeting. "Let her eat with the staff," Vanessa said, loud enough to carry. My mother touched her pearls and said nothing. My father studied his silverware as if it might save him. Harold leaned in, eyes amused. "After dinner, we should discuss that Vertex contract. Family helping family, right?" The words were oily. The math was clear. They hadn't invited me back to belong. They'd invited me to be used. Something in me went utterly still, like a lake when the wind dies. I took out my phone. One finger raised to quiet my mother's sudden worry. I dialed. "Marcus, it's Terry. Regarding Vertex's vendor shortlist, remove James Tech, effective now. Misalignment with our values." I ended the call and set the phone down, my gaze never leaving Harold. "That was my CFO," I said. "You just lost $10 million. Silence spread across the table like spilled wine. Kyle froze, fork in midair. Vanessa's smile cracked. Harold flushed a dangerous red. The clatter of a dropped fork from somewhere behind us. Then nothing. Just the thrum of my own pulse and the bright, brittle music. For 34 years, I'd swallowed it. Being sidelined, being small so others could be large. But not today. Today, in a room designed to impress, I chose to disappoint the only people who ever taught me how. If you've ever had to pick between your self-respect and your family's script, tell me where you're watching from and drop your story in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you're here for real family betrayal stories, the kind where boundaries aren't theory, they're action. Because the kitchen wasn't the worst part. What happened next burned bridges and lit the way out. Growing up in my parents' house felt like walking barefoot across glass. No matter how careful I was, the cuts came anyway. The dinner table was the stage where it always played out. My father would lean forward, eyes fixed on Kyle, pride swelling in his voice. He scored the winning touchdown today. My mother's smile bloomed. The conversation circled him like orbit around a sun. I sat there with my report card tucked under my arm. Straight A's again, scholarships lined up, a small business I'd started with neighborhood clients. None of it mattered. The applause belonged to Kyle. I would place my fork down slowly, nails pressing crescents into my palm, my face practiced in neutrality. Inside, it was a firestorm of shame and longing. The first time I won a state business competition, I came home with a medal strung around my neck. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. "Help your brother with his homework," he said, like my achievement was a footnote. My mother added, "And don't forget the dishes." That medal clinked against my chest as I scrubbed plates while Kyle sprawled on the couch, humming to himself. By 18, I couldn't breathe under the weight of their disappointment disguised as silence. The morning after graduation, I dragged a battered suitcase down the stairs. $800 in savings was all I had. My mother leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You'll be back when you fail," she said. "Family is all you have." Her words were meant to tether me, but they snapped something loose instead. I walked out, the screen door slamming behind me, carrying both my fear and my freedom in that suitcase. Chicago didn't welcome me with open arms. It tested me. My first apartment was smaller than my childhood bedroom, with a heater that rattled and died in the middle of January nights. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the neighbors argue through them, their anger leaking into my solitude. Dinner was ramen noodles with powdered broth, eaten hunched over a wobbly table while balancing textbooks from my night classes. I worked 3 jobs, waitress by day, receptionist by afternoon, cleaning offices by night. Sometimes I would sit on the subway after a double shift, forehead pressed against the cold glass, watching my reflection blur with the city lights. My hands smelled of bleach and coffee. My body ached with exhaustion, but it was my life. earned, chosen, and painfully mine. Phone calls home were brief, filled with scripted exchanges. "How's work?" my mother would ask, but never, "How are you?" My father's tone carried the same undertone of skepticism, as if waiting for me to admit defeat. Holidays became a performance of obligation. I sent cards. I mailed gifts. Excuses about deadlines and flights kept me away. Each year, the distance grew into its own kind of survival. Meanwhile, Kyle never left our hometown. He inherited attention as if it were birthright, dropped out of college, yet still regarded as the heir to the business. I built Terry Solutions out of sweat and sleepless nights, while he coasted on the illusion of potential. My parents fed that illusion with every approving nod, every indulgent smile. And still, I wanted their approval. Even at 34, running a company worth over $200 million, there was a part of me that still longed for one word of unqualified pride from them. That hunger had burrowed deep, seated in every ignored medal, every overlooked victory. When the wedding invitation arrived, thick cardstock embossed in gold, I held it in my hands longer than I expected. For a moment, I wondered if maybe time had softened the edges. When my brother called, his voice carried something new, a quiver under the cheer. "It would really mean a lot if you could come," he said. And for a heartbeat, I wanted to believe him. Then, my mother phoned. "Family should be together for important occasions," she said, her voice unusually warm. But the warmth was thin, see-through. "The James family is very prominent in the business community. It would be nice to have our whole family present." There it was, the truth dressed as invitation. Not reconciliation, but presentation. Not love, but leverage. I told myself I would go, that maybe my success would finally force their eyes to see me. Maybe, finally, I could stand in that house as more than an afterthought. But stepping off that plane into my hometown was like falling backward in time. The streets hadn't changed. The house hadn't changed. Only I had, and even that seemed to shrink as soon as I walked through the front door. My mother opened it, scanning me like an inspection. "You look thin," she said, instead of "I missed you." My father quipped, "The big city girl finally remembers where she came from." Kyle hugged me, awkward but sincere. For a flicker of a moment, I let myself hope. But that night at the rehearsal dinner, I watched Vanessa kiss the air near my cheeks, her eyes calculating, her laugh hollow. I listened as Harold boomed about his company's expansions, his voice filling the room while my father shrank in comparison. And in the corner of that room, I saw my parents' glance exchange, an unspoken plan passing between them. It wasn't reunion, it was transaction. I went back to my hotel with my chest tight, laptop glowing in the dark as I searched. Lines of debt, liens, overdue taxes, all laid bare in cold numbers. James Tech bidding on contracts that brushed too close to my world, pieces falling into place. I closed the laptop, sat in the silence of that hotel room, and felt the ache of every childhood dinner come back. The ache of being valuable only when convenient. And as the wedding day dawned, I knew something would break. The only question was, me or them? The glow of my laptop screen painted the hotel walls in pale blue. Midnight. My dress for tomorrow hung in the corner, still wrapped in its garment bag, like a costume waiting for its performance. But I wasn't thinking about dresses. I was scrolling through financial records, public filings, anything I could find. Each click pulled another thread loose. The truth unraveled fast. My parents' business had been bleeding for years. Late tax extensions, liens on property, loans stacked like teetering dominoes. For all their posturing, the empire I had been excluded from was nothing but hollow scaffolding. And then came the most telling piece. James Tech Industries, Vanessa's family. They weren't just another local powerhouse. They were desperate for a contract, specifically with Vertex Corp., one of my company's largest clients, a $10 million deal that could tip scales. And the person with final influence over the shortlist, me. I leaned back in the stiff hotel chair, pulse steadying into something sharper. It all clicked. The elaborate wedding, the sudden enthusiasm for my presence, the cold calculation in Vanessa's smile. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted leverage. The next morning, over coffee at a quiet cafe, Lisa confirmed what I had pieced together. She pushed her mug between her hands, eyes darting around as if afraid someone might overhear. "Your parents' company hasn't been solvent in years," she whispered. "They've kept it afloat with loans. Kyle's been scrambling, but he's in way over his head. This marriage, it's not about love. It's survival." Her words landed like stones in my stomach. For years, I had wondered why my family wanted nothing from me except distance. Now I knew the truth. They only wanted me back when I had become useful. I returned to my hotel room, pulled the curtains shut, and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed. Emails piling in, reminders of meetings back in Chicago. A message from Marcus, my CFO, flagged urgent. Final approval needed for Vertex vendor shortlist. I opened the file. 3 names, and there it was again, James Tech Industries. I set the phone down, fingers trembling slightly. The choice loomed even then, but I wasn't ready to make it. Not yet. Instead, I decided to watch, to see how far they would push. At the rehearsal dinner that night, I played the role, smiled politely, sipped wine, watched Harold James dominate the conversation with booming laughter, watched my father shrink beneath it. I noticed the way Vanessa's eyes lingered on me, measuring, calculating. "So you're Kyle's sister," she said, her lips curving but her gaze cool. "We wondered if you were even real." I answered evenly. "Business keeps me busy." "Oh, I understand. My mother is on the boards of 3 charities. Women like us never stop working." Her tone was syrupy, but beneath it was steel. She didn't see me as kin. She saw me as competition. Later, I excused myself. In the hallway outside the restrooms, I heard her voice again, this time hushed, sharp. "She's nothing like I expected," Vanessa said to her mother. "Kyle oversold her. She's not impressive at all." "Well," her mother replied, "appearances can be deceiving. Harold looked into her company. Successful, yes, but not on our level. Still, if she can tip the Vertex deal, she's worth keeping close." I stood frozen, my breath caught. So there it was. Confirmation unfiltered. I slipped out before they noticed me, heels echoing down the marble hallway. Back in my hotel room, I stared at the city skyline through the window. My reflection looked back at me, equal parts rage and clarity. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the bargaining chip. The following morning, I dressed deliberately. Dark blue, sharp lines, understated power. Not flashy, but unmissable. As I walked into the church, white roses lined the pews, gold accents glittering like a set piece. The usher glanced at his list, hesitated, then guided me to a seat near the back. Cousins I barely remembered sat closer to the altar. I said nothing, just folded my hands in my lap and watched Kyle, sweating in his suit, his eyes darting toward Harold more than Vanessa. The vows washed over me, hollow and rehearsed, like business statements rather than promises of love. At the reception, the mask slipped further. I mingled, smiled, allowed relatives to marvel at my success story. Their surprise felt like another wound. Even they had absorbed the family narrative that I was the afterthought. When a staffer with an earpiece approached me, I followed, expecting to be led to a table. Instead, we moved past the chandeliers, the glittering tables, the laughter, through a service door, into the kitchen. Steam hit my face, the clang of pans, the shouted orders of chefs, and in the corner, a solitary table set for one. My cheeks burned, my throat tightened, but beneath the humiliation, clarity sharpened. I turned and walked back into the ballroom, past tables of polished silverware and flowing champagne, toward the head table where my family sat, faces painted in careful masks. I leaned in. "There seems to be a mistake," I said evenly. Vanessa's smile was practiced, her voice pitched just right for the audience around us. "No mistake. Important business associates had to be accommodated." My eyes swept the half-empty table. "It looks like there's room." My mother shifted. My father fixed his eyes on the fork in front of him. Vanessa's lips curled. "Let her eat with the staff. That's all she runs. Staff." Silence. Except for Harold's satisfied hum. Except for the thrum of my own pulse. It was then that Harold leaned forward, his smile thick with entitlement. "Perhaps after dinner we can discuss that Vertex contract. Family helping family, right?" And I knew. They had written my script for me. Forgotten daughter, useful pawn, silent tool. But what they hadn't counted on was that I had my own lines to deliver. For a moment, the ballroom noise dulled, like someone had pulled cotton over my ears. Vanessa's words, "Let her eat with the staff," hung in the air, sharp as glass. I looked around. Half-empty chairs sat inches from me, yet none of my family moved. My mother's hand clutched her pearls as if they could shield her from shame. My father's fingers straightened his silverware with obsessive precision. And Kyle, my brother, my blood, looked down at his plate, unable to lift his eyes. Something inside me fractured. Years of silence, of being measured and found lacking, snapped in that instant. But instead of an explosion, there was calm. Cold, surgical. I reached for my phone. "What are you doing?" my mother whispered, panic flickering across her face. I raised one finger, my gaze steady. I dialed. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Marcus, it's Terry. Regarding Vertex's vendor shortlist, remove James Tech. Effective immediately. Their practices don't align with our values." I ended the call, the weight of 1,000,000,000 chandelier crystals pressing overhead. My eyes locked with Harold's. "That was my CFO," I said. "You just lost $10 million. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. Somewhere behind me, a fork clattered onto porcelain. Heads turned, whispers rippled, spreading outward like rings in water. Harold's face flushed crimson. Vanessa's smile collapsed into a grimace. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. My father looked as though the air had been sucked out of him. Kyle froze, fork halfway to his mouth. "You can't do that," Harold finally sputtered, voice booming yet shaky. "I just did," I replied, my tone level. He leaned forward, jaw tight. "Do you realize what you've cost us?" "Cost you?" I said softly. "Or cost yourselves by thinking you could use me?" My words landed heavy, and for once, no one rushed to cover them. Then came the breaking point. Vanessa leaned back, her voice loud enough for half the room to hear. "She doesn't run anything here. She's a nobody who hides behind spreadsheets and titles. That's all she'll ever be." I stood, slowly. The scrape of my chair against marble echoed through the ballroom. Every eye followed me. I smoothed the fabric of my dress with steady hands, though my pulse throbbed in my ears. I looked at Vanessa, then Harold, then my parents. "Congratulations on your wedding," I said. "I wish you exactly the happiness you deserve." And then I turned. The room parted as I walked, a quiet current carrying me toward the exit. Servers froze, trays balanced midair, guests whispered behind hands. Some faces glowed with shock, others with a strange, guilty recognition, like they had seen injustice and were relieved someone had finally named it. By the door, a young server held out a tray of champagne. I glanced up. Recognition flickered. Sarah Evans. She had once worked at my parents' company, fired when she asked for maternity leave. "Miss Wilson," she whispered, "I overheard what happened. They treated me the same way. I just wanted to say thank you." Her eyes shone, tired but fierce. For the first time all evening, my chest loosened. "Sarah Evans," I said. "Accounting, right?" She nodded, surprised I remembered. I slipped my business card across the tray, pushing aside the untouched glasses. "Would you like to leave with me? I could use company for dinner, and I'd like to hear about your qualifications." Sarah hesitated. Then she set down the tray, untied her apron, and smiled. "I believe I would." Together, we stepped out of the ballroom. Behind us, chaos erupted. Vanessa's hiss, Harold's furious growl, my mother's strangled plea. But the doors shut, muffling it all. In the cool air of the lobby, my phone buzzed. Kyle's name flashed across the screen. I silenced it. We crossed the marble floor, heels clicking in sync, the sound steady and defiant. By the time we reached my rental car, 6 more calls had come. Texts followed. Kyle begging, my father demanding, my mother guilt-tripping. I showed Sarah, and she murmured, "They only remember your family when they need something." "Exactly," I said, unlocking the car. We drove into the night, toward a small Italian place I remembered from high school, where the owner greeted me with warmth my own parents never had. He insisted on his best wine, his best table. For the first time in years, I ate without bracing for judgment. But even over candlelight, laughter, and Sarah's gratitude, the phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Each buzz carried the weight of confrontation still waiting. My brother, my parents, the fallout. Later, back at my hotel, headlights swept across the parking lot. A figure leaned against a car, arms folded. Kyle. I killed the engine, heart heavy. He straightened, his face pale under the yellow glow of the lamppost. 15 missed calls, desperation written in the slump of his shoulders. "Could you not have answered just one?" he asked as I stepped out. The night air was sharp, biting. I shut the door behind me, bracing. Because if the wedding had been their performance, this, the confrontation under a streetlight, was about to be the reckoning. The parking lot was nearly deserted, washed in dim yellow light from overhead lamps. My breath clouded in the night air as I walked toward the hotel entrance. Then I saw him, Kyle, leaning against our parents' car, shoulders hunched, his figure drawn tight like a bowstring about to snap. 15 missed calls, he said as I approached, his voice low and rough. You couldn't answer just one? I stopped a few feet from him. The cold wind cut across the lot, but my chest felt hotter than flame. I had nothing to say to any of you. He pushed himself upright, running a trembling hand through his thinning hair. You humiliated us, Terry, in front of everyone we know. Do you even realize what you've done? I folded my arms, steady. I realize I stopped being used. That's all I've done. His laugh came bitter, broken. You don't understand. This isn't just about you. That contract you canceled, that was everything. Dad's company is hanging by a thread. The merger with James Tech, my marriage to Vanessa. It was our only hope. The words sank heavy into the empty air. So, you admit it, I said coldly. The wedding was a business arrangement, a performance. His shoulders slumped, shame flickering across his face. It was both. I do care for Vanessa. But yes, Harold made it clear. The wedding, the show of unity, it would help seal the Vertex deal. Having you there was part of the plan. I felt my stomach knot tighter, even though I had already suspected every bit of it. And you let them sit me in the kitchen, I whispered, like an embarrassment you had to hide. You could have stopped it. You could have spoken up. Kyle's voice cracked. That was Vanessa's idea. I swear I didn't know until it was happening. I should have said something, I know, but You didn't. I cut him off sharply. You never do. All your life, you've let Mom and Dad shield you while I fought for every scrap of recognition. Tonight was no different. He lowered his head, staring at the asphalt as if the cracks there might hold answers. I know, he admitted. I've always known how unfairly they treated you. I just never had the courage to say anything. And now your courage comes when everything's crumbling around you? My voice rose, the words slicing sharper than I intended. Now you want me to play savior? His eyes lifted, wide and pleading. Is there any way you'll reconsider? The wedding's already ruined, but the business, maybe it can still be saved. I studied him under the harsh light. He looked smaller than I remembered. The proud younger brother, once cheered for touchdowns while I was told to wash the dishes, now reduced to desperation. Part of me wanted to reach out, but another part, the part that had been crushed at dinner tables, ignored on graduation nights, erased from family photos, was stronger. No, Kyle, I said quietly but firmly. I won't reconsider. What happens to the business is not my responsibility. It never was. His breath hitched, his voice trembling. But family loyalty goes both ways, I snapped. When was the last time any of you showed loyalty to me? My grades, my achievements, my company? Nothing ever mattered until you needed something, until I became convenient. The words struck like blows. He flinched, his mouth opening, closing, no excuses left. The silence pressed down on both of us. Finally, he whispered, Vanessa's threatening to call off the wedding. Harold says you've destroyed his company's reputation. I tilted my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. Harold destroyed it himself, Kyle. He turned his daughter's wedding into a boardroom negotiation. And Vanessa? If she really loved you, she wouldn't need the money attached. Kyle's laugh was hollow. We both know that's not going to happen. Then maybe, I said, you dodged a bullet. He shook his head slowly, eyes glistening in the lamplight. Easy for you to say. You've got your company, your life in Chicago. What do I have? A failing business. Probably no wife. Parents who will blame me for all of it. For the first time that night, I saw him not as the golden child, but as a man stripped bare. Desperate. Afraid. You have a chance, I said, softening. A chance to start over. To build something that's yours, not what Mom and Dad mapped out. Terrifying, yes, but liberating. Trust me, I know. He shook his head, torn between fear and hope. I don't know if I can. You can, I said, holding his gaze, but not with me carrying you. You'll have to stand on your own. The wind picked up, rattling a loose sign above the lot. Kyle shoved his hands into his pockets. I should go, he murmured. They're waiting for me at the hotel. Good luck, I said simply. He took a few steps, then turned back. His voice was quiet, but clear. For what it's worth, I've always been proud of you, Terry. I just never told you. The words pierced deeper than I expected. The first real compliment from any of them. My throat tightened, but I only nodded. He walked away, swallowed by the shadows, leaving me standing under the harsh glow of a streetlight. For the first time, I wasn't the one left small. Later, back in my room, I sat on the bed, phone buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, notifications stacking up. I ignored them all. But one message stopped me cold. From Mom and Dad. Subject, we owe you an apology. My breath caught. My finger hovered over the screen. After 34 years of silence, of being invisible, could this really be an apology? Or just another attempt to pull me back into their collapse? I opened the email. The subject line glared back at me. We owe you an apology. For 34 years, my parents had never once admitted they were wrong. Never once told me that the silence, the favoritism, the indifference had cut me deeper than words could reach. Yet here it was, in black and white, written on my father's business letterhead. Ironic, considering the business itself was collapsing. I read their words slowly, half expecting them to twist into blame. But no, they called their behavior inexcusable. They admitted prioritizing the company over family, over me. They wrote that they didn't expect forgiveness or money, only a chance, someday, to rebuild. I set the laptop aside and stared at the ceiling of my hotel room. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. The letter shook me, but it didn't erase the years of neglect. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about them. It was about freeing myself. The following week, I was back in my Chicago office. Marcus briefed me on the Vertex contract transition, assured me our company's reputation was solid. But the real shift wasn't in the numbers. It was in me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running to prove myself to anyone. Not to my parents, not to Kyle, not to anyone. I followed through with Sarah Evans, the server who had walked out of that ballroom beside me. Within days, our HR team sent her an offer letter for the new Chicago satellite office. When she called to accept, her voice shook with gratitude. "This changes everything for me and my daughter," she said. I smiled. "You earned it. Anyone who survived working for my father has strength most companies only dream of." Her story reminded me that my family's failures didn't have to define me. I could turn pain into opportunity, not just for myself, but for others. Weeks passed. Rumors about the wedding fiasco fizzled. James Tech limped, then stumbled. Harold made noise about lawsuits that never materialized. Vanessa disappeared from Kyle's life almost overnight, proving what we both knew all along. Her love was conditional on contracts and capital. Kyle, though, he surprised me. He emailed from Denver. A renewable energy startup had hired him, and for the first time, his words carried excitement unchained from family obligation. "It's terrifying," he wrote, "but also the first time I feel like I'm building something real." I responded simply, "Better late than never." Months turned into a year. Therapy sessions helped me unravel the knots left behind by decades of conditional love. My company thrived, expanding into new markets, developing products I was proud of. But the decision that startled even me came later, opening a new manufacturing facility in my hometown. The irony wasn't lost on me. The property I purchased was the former site of James Tech. Where manipulation and arrogance had once ruled, jobs and innovation would rise. At the groundbreaking, cameras flashed, reporters scribbled headlines about the hometown daughter bringing opportunity back. My parents came to the opening, standing stiff at the edges until I invited them closer. In my speech, I acknowledged their role, not as flawless parents, but as people who had instilled in me a relentless work ethic. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough to honor the moment without reopening wounds. Later, my father cleared his throat and asked if I'd consider his advice on local suppliers. For once, he didn't push for control or position, just offered insight. I accepted. It was a small olive branch, but one we both recognized. Kyle flew in, this time with a woman named Jessica, a fellow engineer who laughed easily and looked at him with genuine affection. Watching him network confidently, free of old shadows, I felt pride for the brother I finally saw as his own man. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, I hosted a dinner at my Chicago home. Around the table sat my parents, Kyle and Jessica, Sarah and her daughter, close friends, and my partner Jackson, a widowed architect who had taught me the meaning of steady love. The atmosphere was warm, unforced, filled with laughter. At one point, my father lifted his glass. His voice was gruff, but his eyes wet. "To Terry," he said, "who had the courage to stand when none of us did, and who's shown more grace than we deserved." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was sincere, and sincerity mattered more than perfection. Later, on the balcony overlooking the skyline, Kyle joined me. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just gone along with it?" he asked. "Played the role? Smiled through the dinner in the kitchen?" I thought about it. The business merger would have gone through. Vanessa would still be your wife. Mom and Dad might have saved the company. For a while. But I would have lost myself all over again. He nodded. It felt like watching you break a spell that night. Suddenly, I could see it. The manipulation, the silence, all of it. We stood in quiet for a moment, the city lights sprawling beneath us. For the first time, I didn't feel small in my own family's story. I felt free. Because that wedding day, humiliating as it was, wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning, the collapse of everything false so something honest could rise. And here's the truth I want to leave you with. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Loyalty that only flows one way isn't loyalty at all. Family isn't defined by blood, but by mutual respect and care. And forgiveness? It doesn't mean excusing the harm. It means freeing yourself to live without the weight of bitterness. I built a life I once thought impossible. A company, a chosen family, a love that doesn't measure me against impossible standards. And all of it started the moment I refused to eat in the kitchen. So let me ask you, have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your self-respect? Have you ever walked away from the table they tried to shove you under and claimed your own seat? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it, because your voice matters here. If this journey resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or used, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding strength when everyone else doubts you. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You deserve a seat at the table, not in the kitchen.